Hello, I hope this day is finding you well. My name is Lisa Donahue, and I'm your host of Heart of the Matter, A Soulful Cure. The focus of this program is holistic health, creating the optimal state of health for each and every one of us, mind, body, and spirit. In today, in getting to the heart of yet another matter, my guest is Deirdre Miller. She's a Thrive team member, VIP, I'll say, baker extraordinaire. In fact, if you go to Middlebury, there's a restaurant that's actually a landmark, and she offers her goods there. She's an animal enthusiast, a crafter, a mother, and much more. And today we're going to talk about experience as teacher enduring the loss of a child. Yes, you heard it correct. So thank you so much, Deirdre, for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
I salute your courage, your bravery, your authentic vulnerability in offering this intimate, rare gift to our viewers, which is going to occur in two parts, airing over the course of 4 to 6 weeks during this holiday season. So you're the expert here. If there's anything that comes up that you'd rather shift or move on to a different topic, you just let me know, and we will do that. And I truly hope that doing this interview is liberating, impactful, healing in some manner for you. At least that was my intent, knowing also that you're indeed helping a lot of people. You know, when you think about the holidays, they're certainly festive. They also can magnify loss, and not everything is Currier and Ives for everyone, nor the beloved Hallmark Channel, but who doesn't like to eclipse into that from time to time and watch those shows? I know I do. The loss of a child in general, there's probably nothing more difficult. I can't even imagine. So I think any viewer can benefit, given any loss, with what we share today. And also, Deirdre, thank you for coming on, because today is my 57th birthday, Heinz 57. And Georgia O'Keeffe often talked about stretching ourselves. And so this was a quote of hers that I love. I've been absolutely terrified every moment of my life, and I've never let it keep me from doing a single thing I wanted to do. So doing this interview is also a gift for me. So please stay tuned, stick around. We're going to learn something new, as well as a tip or tool we can use to improve our daily lives, or maybe the life of someone else. Not to mention that our hearts being opened and awakened, probably by sledgehammer. So time's an illusion. Hard to believe I was here last a year ago, exactly, and then I did a taping with Okemo Valley TV, Positively Pandemic, Epidemic, Pandemic, Endemic, oh my. So nice to be here in a new theme. So Deirdre, it's so meaningful to spend some time with you in this way. Can you briefly share a little bit about your background, your education, your interests, and also may people contact the station if they would like to consult with you?
First, yes, they can contact the station. I would be glad to speak to anybody who would have any questions or concerns. That's my goal here today, is to help anybody going through what I had to endure over the past 5 years with the loss of a child. I come from the state of New Jersey. I'm not a Vermonter by birth. I'm a Vermonter now by choice. And my background includes, as you said, animals. I was a director of a no-kill animal shelter for many, many years, a passion that I truly, truly loved. I was a manager of an animal hospital with a background in human resource. So having control is one thing that I truly value, and being able to manage a situation is another thing that I value. So what I've had to go through here, I had no control, and that is something I had to learn to live with, is having that sense and the feeling of where did I go wrong and how could I have helped.
Does it help to talk about it?
Yes, it does now.
It does now.
Yes.
So there's a couple questions that I have for you, and we're going to do our best to guide through this, because we're doing a part 2, because I knew that we would run out of time in 30 minutes. I would like you to tell us about Samantha. I saw an amazing tribute that I believe you had written about her. And also, I wanted to know if you could share with us, as you felt comfortable, what happened, and what do you think might have driven the decision on behalf of Samantha?
Samantha was a free spirit. She believed in the earth and giving back to it. She had the same passions I had with animals. She would rescue any of stray animals she could find on the street. She also would be the person that if you were walking down the street and you were sitting on the side of the road, wet, hungry, she'd give you her coat She'd give you her shoes. She'd give you her last dollar that was in her pocket. She volunteered a lot of her time at animal sanctuaries, but she also was an extremely intelligent person. So much so that when she was a child and in kindergarten, they had said, what are we going to do with this child? If she gets too bored, we're going to lose her. So they would take her out of kindergarten class and first grade classes when they were learning to read and put her with the preschoolers because she was already reading in kindergarten and first grade. And they would take her downstairs and she would read to them. So I think that Samantha needed to keep busy at all times. Her mind, if it got too, I want to say, tired, too bored, she would go off. She would go off on the wrong path. I don't know exactly when Samantha started suffering from bipolar depression because the doctors would never look at it as bipolar depression because you're talking this was 10 years ago versus today. They would say she's just a teenager, she's acting out, she's being bratty, that type thing. But we, living with her, we knew that she'd have ups and downs, many of them, and we didn't know how to handle it as parents as a teenager when you have a doctor saying there's nothing wrong with her. It wasn't until her later years in her life that she was given that diagnosis of being depressed. And at that point, it was too far. She didn't know what to do.
So she ultimately took her life then?
She absolutely did. Yesterday was the 5-year anniversary of it.
November 18th?
Yes, November 18th, 2016. We got a phone call saying that Samantha, we got a phone call from her boyfriend saying that she didn't come home that night. And it's very unlike her to not communicate with her sister. She has a sister, Madison, who was her best friend. And I'd like to believe I was her best friend too, because we always heard from Samantha. At least every 6 hours we'd get a text message or a phone call. She would text you at 3 in the morning. She'd be I just had a birthday last week, and I would wake up in the morning and you'd see that she texted me at 2 in the morning just to make sure that she was the first person to wish me happy birthday. And so we went a day without hearing from her, and then we went another day, and then we went another day, and it just started building up, and I said, we need to do something. We need to figure out where she is, what happened, because this isn't Samantha to not communicate. We didn't expect this. We jumped in our car. We drove straight through the night.
Where were you living at the time?
I was in New Jersey.
And you drove to Florida?
Florida. We drove straight through the night to Florida. I didn't even want to stop to use a rest stop or to, there were times that I was falling asleep behind the wheel just to get to Florida to search for her.
Because as the mother, you knew.
I knew something wasn't right. And we went directly to the police. We were on news channels. We were in newspapers. We were known as the family from New Jersey that traveled over Thanksgiving weekend to find their daughter. And we would start our search at 6 a.m. in the morning till midnight and do it all over again for 11 days straight. Until finally, somebody sent me a private message on my Facebook with a picture of my daughter's car that said, young woman found deceased in her car in a parking lot. And the way that it was then, everybody assumed, oh, drug overdose or something like that. And I knew that my daughter didn't have a drug addiction. I knew that she didn't have that problem. But I also didn't know that she was so depressed that she would take her own life the way that she did. And the way that she did was a very horrible way.
Wow.
I don't know if you want me to go into that.
Can you give a glimpse of that?
Samantha was on anxiety and depression medicine, and she had not taking it for 3 months, but then decided to take 3 months of medicine all in one time. So the medical examiner told me that she had 40 times the lethal dosage within her body when they did the medical examiner's report, and that was 11 days. It took 11 days for them to find her body after she had passed away. Even that much staying within her system, she truly intentionally meant to take her own life, and till this day I don't know why.
We're going to get into that in a little bit. I can only imagine how much that would plague you nonstop. And I remember the very first impression that I had with you when we were talking on the phone, given your HR background. You said a beautiful statement that said, I can take direction and I can give direction. And when I asked what brought you to Vermont from New Jersey, I too am a Flatlander, originally from Western New York, but people who remember me on this show may or may not remember that, but yeah, so I'm not local either. Another Flatlander. And when you told me what brought you from New Jersey to Vermont to start anew, and I thought, oh my gosh, that is just amazing. What an amazing, commitment to propelling your life. And it also just felt like a snap judgment to me, almost like whether I called it survivor guilt or if I felt, how could I be a better XYZ parent? How can I do more motivational interviewing with our son Miles? How can I, this woman, it really tugged at my heart. And I was at a loss for words, which is unusual for me. And I also was looking at your email address and I'm thinking, this sounds so indigenous. It almost feels like Eskimo or something interesting, but it is Mamiamak. And I'm reading this over again and over again, and I didn't see it at first, but what it translates to is, Mom, I am okay. And I don't know, you had to see me in that moment, which is neither here nor there. So when we were prepping for this show, you mentioned the potential shame of Samantha being diagnosed with bipolar depression 10 years ago versus today. Is there anything that you want to expand on this? What might have been different today, or was there any potential of anxiety and depression with roots in your family? Anything you might want to share?
When you ask me that question, it makes me to dive deep into myself and realize that I come from a family with a long background of depression and anxiety. And it stems from my mother's side of the family mostly, where I see my brothers, excuse me, I see my brothers who suffer from anxiety, one in the form of anger and one who suffers from depression, so much so that sometimes I don't think he even realizes who he is and what he's saying or how he's affecting the people around him. And it's so misunderstood. Because 10 years ago, you couldn't turn on the news. You couldn't turn on the TV and see if you're suffering from depression, call this phone number. You wouldn't open a magazine and see if you need help, call this phone number, or there's this medication, because it was so pushed under the carpet. You were meant to feel ashamed for it. Now, I turn on the TV and I see if you suffer depression, there's this medication, or I've seen signs at bus terminals and train stations, if you need help, call this number, where I wish that 10 years ago that would have been offered to my daughter. Even to us as parents, my husband and myself as parents 10 years ago, if we would have had the help to help her, maybe she'd still be here. Or 5 years ago, if she would have had the help that she needed, that is available now, maybe she would still be here.
I see. If you're just joining us, my name's Lisa Donahue. I'm your host of Heart of the Matter, and I'm talking with Deirdre Miller today about the loss of her daughter 5 years ago. This feels like a good point to mention this quote that I shared with you. The book is More Together Than Alone by Mark Nepo. It was shared with someone in one of my writing groups named Nelson, and this has been just such a lifesaver during this epidemic, pandemic, now I would call endemic, that we're in. And this is, I double-checked the reference, And it is the latest one, and if I'm wrong, someone please correct me. But in 2002, the World Health Organization issued its first World Report on Violence and Health. In the sample year 2000, about 1.6 million people in the world lost their lives to violence. 20% of these deaths were a result of armed conflicts, 1/3 were homicides, but almost 50% were from suicide. In other words, more people worldwide die by their own hand than by war. Close to 750,000 people are in such pain and so dissatisfied with life that they kill themselves. In 2000, the equivalent of the entire population of Manhattan was killed by violence, and the equivalent of half of Manhattan took their own lives. What does this say about modern life on the planet? So again, that was the last report of this nature that the World Health Organization has done. Isn't that amazing?
It is.
You know, it's sobering at best. So you were talking before with your HR background, and believe me, Deirdre is a queen of quite a lot. She's an organizational maven. Did you feel a loss of control on how to access and help your daughter? And in addition to the ongoing massive grief, what other emotions and feelings did you and do you currently process?
As everybody knows, grief comes in many stages, none of them set in stone that you're going to suffer from this to this to this. My first stage was, I want to say, shock. I remember being in the police station, being told that, yes, that was my daughter that they found. I remember thinking that I was replaying an actual movie over in my mind, just collapsing to the floor and just screaming, why? And them not allowing me to go to see her because the time frame that it had been, 11 days. I was the first person to see her as she entered the world. I felt as a mother I should be the one to kiss her goodbye, and I didn't have that opportunity. So there was my sorrow and my grief and anger. I've been angry. I've been sad. It took me 8 months to leave my house after she passed away. It took me weeks to want to take care of my own body after she passed away. And in those 8 months' time, I just felt like I was walking around with blinders on, that I couldn't see anything or hear anything or accept anything. And I kept questioning myself, where did I go wrong? Why didn't I know? Why didn't she trust me enough to reach out to me? I went as far as taking her journals, which were eventually, everything that she owned was mailed from Florida to New Jersey to be with us. And the very last box that I opened, I remember my daughter Madison, who's her sister, saying, Mom, Samantha kept very thorough journals. Find them. Find her journals. And the very final box, I had huge boxes shipped to our house. The last box, the last thing I pulled out of the box were her journals. And I sat down and I read her journals, and I could see her grief and her sorrow, but her journals didn't have much happiness in them. It was all of her sorrow and her grief and what she was feeling at that time. I don't even want to say grief. Well, she was grieving. She was grieving the loss of her boyfriend from a few years prior, who she had loved. So I have to wonder if that added to her decision to take her own life. But then I took my cell phone out and I sat down and I went side by side, journal, cell phone. Every day that she wrote in the journal, I never really heard from her. So she kept her sorrow and her sadness away from me, where the day that she didn't write in her journal, I assumed was a good day because I'd get a picture, or I'd get a, hi Mom, how are you? I found a shark tooth on the beach today, or I rescued another cat, I now have 2 bunnies, that type thing. So she hid it from us. And I feel as her mother, why didn't I know? Why didn't I sense that my daughter was so sad? Why didn't she why didn't she reach out to me, and why didn't she trust me enough to say, Mom, I need help? And I sit back and I try to figure out, did she? Did I not see it as a mom? Was I under the impression that, hey, my 27-year-old daughter is doing great. She's happy. And but that's what she led me to believe. So she did keep it from me. And
It sounds like your entire family.
she did. And she never told her sister either, who they were very close. And we toyed with sending her sister to Florida to be with her for a week, and that was August of 2016. We put her on a plane, we sent her down, they spent a week together, they had a great time, and then that day that she put her sister back on the plane to send her back up to New Jersey, she wrote in the journal how she was missing her sister already. And I'm grateful that they spent time together, because a few months later is when Samantha decided that she was going to take her own life.
Wow, that's amazing. And time goes so quickly on these shows. We have like 8 minutes left. That was a wonderful account, and again, you know, very brave of you to offer that to the viewers, because our aim was to help people, and this show will be airing during the holidays, and that was the overarching hope, that we might be able to help people. So if you think about it, I guess a wide range in trying to relate to ourselves now and our viewers, we've all feel these things: failure, shame, guilt, cynicism, maybe resentment, being jaded, deep sadness, melancholy, highs, lows, understandable lack of drive, motivation, what's the point on some days. Can you share if her death still, of course it does, but how, I should say, does her death consume you? Like the mental real estate of rerunning the tapes, questioning, playing Columbo, moments you least expect it, you mentioned. Sights, sounds, smells, please expand, you know, however you see fit. The other day I was having my muffler taken care of here in Rutland by a wonderful place. And when I asked the woman what her name was, she told me. And then when I asked her what her husband's name was that was going to be doing the work, she said Henry, which was my dad's name, and he passed away in October of 2019. And right in that moment, I just started tearing up. So I can only imagine what it's like for you.
It's funny you say sights, sounds, smells, because I can replay those 11 days like it's a movie. I can see myself searching. I can still hear the traffic. I can smell the beach. I remember I could see the gas station I pulled into. I remember which pump I was at. I remember people passing by me. But what was one of the hardest things about it is when we were down there in Florida searching for her over Thanksgiving, over those 11 days, we had flyers made up, and we went to every person we could find on the street and say, have you seen this person? Have you seen this person? I opened up my private life, my private Facebook, to be a very public Facebook. And people that I never knew, people that I never met, were reaching out to me saying, oh, we think we saw her here. So we were running and we were going to this gas station, or we saw her there. Sometimes I felt like people were just sending me all over a state that I had never been to. I never went to Florida. You know, I've never been further south than Maryland up until that moment. And so I replay that over and over and over in my head all the time. And my husband recalls driving by a parking lot and saying, I think that's her car in the parking lot. And I said, no, I don't think it is. I just want to go home. I'm so tired. I want to go back to the house. I want to go, you know, to sleep for the night. I can't do this anymore. And we actually believe it may have been her car. Did I miss her? That type thing. But then I've had somebody say, she wouldn't want you to see her in that state. So it was a good thing that you didn't turn around and go back to that parking lot. It was a very challenging time, but I have learned, when talking to you, I can see it all over. I can remember it. I try daily not to remember it, but there's times when a song will come on the radio and it'll remind me of her. I don't know if your fans really know who Pink Floyd is, but there's a song out there called Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd.
Oh, yes.
And every time that it would come on the radio, she would call me and just play it into the phone. Say nothing. And I knew it was her saying, "Hey, Mom, I wish you were here." So now, when I hear it on the radio, I feel as if it's me playing it back, saying, "Hey, I wish you were here," back at her.
Oh.
So, and then just yesterday I was out and I was shopping for a shirt, and the shirt got stuck on something and I could not figure out what it was stuck on. So finally I took the hangers and I got apart, and the shirt it was stuck on was New York Rangers, which was my daughter's New York Rangers. So there's signs that she's around. And 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to handle that.
But you can now,
I can.
because when we have just 3 minutes left, when we talk about the challenges of surviving a loss by suicide, can one ever thrive again? Is it even possible, or how is it possible? How has it changed you for the better, worse, strengthening, challenging you to the max, I'm sure, and maybe in the part 2 of this show we can launch into that. And in case people don't see part 2, which I hope they do, what would you say to someone right now if they're considering taking their life?
Please don't, because you may think it's an out. It's not. It's just the beginning of what you leave behind for anybody who has to live without you.
To pick up the pieces.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the hardest part is trying to find the answers as to why. And it gives the survivors guilt. I live with such survivor's guilt over this whole entire, past 5 years. And I also live with failure, which, coming from human resource, I've always been in control. And this is one situation that I had no control over. And until this day, I do feel I still don't have control over it, but I can control how I go on from this moment on.
That is so well said. I think none of us has ultimate control, only the higher power does. But I can really appreciate your statement about control. One of the things that speaks to me also in this book, it seems to be fitting here, by Charles Dickens, began his novel, The Tale of Two Cities, with the sentence, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Every era, every generation, every day is the best of times and the worst of times. It is up to us to choose, as those before us chose, between love and fear. And like everyone else in the world, we must now choose between caring for each other and versus striking out at each other." That was a quote by Mark Nepo in this book. But yeah, the best of times, the worst of times. And so as we wrap up this show, do you feel that you can, obviously you've had some opportunities to gain from this? It sounds like from moving here on out, you have some new intentionality?
I do.
That's good.
I
I
do.
want to offer you this piece here by Khalil Gibran, one of my very famous, one of my favorites, I should say, and he is famous, of course, poets from Lebanon. So a woman, this is called On Children. "And a woman who held a babe against her bosom said, 'Speak to us of children.' And he said, 'Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For life does not backward nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might, that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable. Thank you. I'm Lisa Donahue, your host of Heart of the Matter, and we look forward to seeing you in part 2.